we light our chalice to open our reflection today. As we light this flame, we will hear words adapted from American theologian and minister Tandika. This common world I love anew, as the lifeblood of generations who refuse to surrender their humanity in an inhumane world courses through my veins. My despair is transformed to hope, and I begin anew the legacy and light of caring. Our reading this morning is about William Ellery Channing. Channing was a leading light in the early Unitarian Church in the US in the 19th century. His teachings and his life were inspirational to many, and his legacy is very strong. It is not a biographical piece. Well, not just that. It's instead a piece about transformation, a piece that describes how a deep spiritual awakening changed Channing, sets out the difference it made to him and to the greater good. This is Channing and the response to slavery from the Unitarian Universalist Association. Slavery has often been called America's original sin. Yet white American Unitarians, like most white Americans, were slow to speak out against slavery as an immoral institution. The Unitarian minister, William Ellery Channing, was no exception. Channing was a major voice for American Unitarianism in the early and mid-19th century. He served as the minister of the prestigious Federal Street Church in Boston from 1803 to 1842. In 1819, Channing preached the sermon Unitarian Christianity at the ordination of Jared Sparks in Baltimore. And the sermon claimed the label Unitarian for the liberal Congregationalists who affirmed the use of reason in religion, rejected the idea that human nature was depraved, and believed the Bible was written by human beings. Throughout his career, Channing's sermons explored the relationship between humanity and the divine, put forth Jesus as a great moral teacher, and rejected the Trinity as non-biblical. As a result of both his stirring sermons and his commitment to pastoral care, Channing's congregation grew significantly during his ministry. Eventually, the congregation was able to call an assistant minister to work with him. Now, in his youth, Channing had been exposed to the institution of slavery while working as a tutor for a slave-owning family in Virginia. And what he saw sickened him. It also led him to conclude that the slaveholders were as much damaged by the institution as the slaves. Yet Channing was slow to speak out against slavery. His position amongst the Boston elite and the marginalisation he knew he would face if he spoke out led him to proceed cautiously. In 1825, when he finally began to put forth an anti-slavery position, he made it clear that while he was against slavery, he was also opposed to the radical rhetoric of the abolitionists. Now, because the Federal Street Church membership included many of Boston's most powerful industrialists who did not approve of Channing's anti-slavery sentiments, Channing, for the most part, did not speak publicly on the matter. Conversations with the abolitionist and author Lydia Maria Child and with Unitarian minister Samuel J. May, both friends of Channing, caused him to change his course. In 1835, Channing published the book Slavery and began to advocate publicly for the gradual abolition of slavery. Channing's book affirmed the human rights of slaves, and argued that slaves have the same rational nature and the same powers of conscience as those who are not enslaved. Slavery was a sin against God, in Channing's view, because it prevented both slaves and slave owners from following the ethical teachings of Jesus and perfecting their human nature. This view met strong disapproval from the powerful Bostonians in Channing's congregation, and the matter came to a head in 1840 when abolitionist Charles Follen, a close friend of Channing, died in a maritime accident. Channing preached a powerful sermon following Follen's death and was then asked by the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society if a memorial service could be held at his church. When the congregation's standing committee rejected Channing's request to hold the memorial service at Frederick Street Church, Channing essentially resigned as the congregation's minister. Although he and the congregation did not formally end their relationship, he relinquished his salary, he ceased to act as their minister, and he preached only once more in 1842. The transformation of William Ellery's view on slavery. America is burning. In a year where twists and turns of national and international news has been both bewildering and unanticipated, our news screens are now filled with reports and films of riot and violent protests in US cities. The protests began as a response to the killing of George Floyd, 46-year-old African-American, during an arrest in Minneapolis. But it was not an isolated incident. Many African Americans are killed by the police each year, seemingly often treated as guilty before being proven innocent, and facing far harsher treatment overall than their white counterparts. Now, the protests are not all violent. Those that are certainly not all carried out by black people. The protests are often infiltrated by others looking to generate violence and turmoil to meet their own separate agendas. Yet the anguish, the frustration, the sheer desperation for justice, fairness, and freedom is clear. This is a voice seeking justice, crying to be heard, again and again and again. Now, the response on social media to all this has been divisive. Those opposed to change, those unable to accept there is a case to be argued for, those looking to highlight inconsistencies on both sides are there too. And there are those who take a brave and passionate stand in defence of equality and love and compassion. Those brave and passionate stands are hard to do. I have great admiration for those that stand above the parapet to tell their stories, to take a stand against oppression, to inspire and to lead others to step up too. Now, we heard a little earlier about the transformation of William Ellery Channing. Channing was a man who lived by the deeper understanding and guidance his faith gave him. Strongly Christian in approach and theology, albeit as a Unitarian Christian, Channing spent many years trying to avoid controversy and upset. His congregation would not support radical stands, those against the prevailing social order. Yet Channing was transformed. By following his heart and his head, he recognised the error and the terror of slavery, and the overriding principles that love and freedom and tolerance brought to the situation. He could see the unfairness. He could see slavery was counter to everything he believed in bringing the kingdom of God to the world. He recognised that by keeping silent in the face of oppression, he was allowing the injustice to continue. Religion is about the transformation of the human. We celebrate the divine, the good, the human wonderfulness, the universe, by recognizing the role that we, as humans, have in bringing messages of love and justice to the world. The difference between knowing something is wrong and taking an active role in helping to correct it can be wide. Like Channing, it's sometimes easier to recognise the injustice, not to support it, but to just keep quiet and hope it will go away. It rarely will. It's only through our active engagement that a better world will be found. Only by our actions will change occur. Only by becoming the change you want will things get better. Now, in the book of James, in the Christian New Testament, we're reminded that faith without works is dead. Our faith, our spiritual path, feeds our conscience. On that, we must act. Some may fear the supposed risk of mixing politics with religion, but I think this is an oversimplification. If our conscience accepts we must treat our neighbours as ourselves, then our actions must flow from that point. I'm going to ask us now to come together in a time of stillness and silence, to reflect on how we might bear witness to a need to overturn an injustice in the world. What do you care most about? What are you afraid to voice? What steps can you take, individually or in community? As we start to emerge into the new normal, what essential change will you help to make? Who will you stand beside in the pursuit of loving justice? And how will you bring your hopes to the congregation to bring us together to tackle injustice together? How will you be the change you hope to see? So let us come together now in quiet and in stillness as we settle our bodies, focusing on our breath, perhaps closing our eyes. I shall speak some words. I shall strike the singing bowl, and we'll come together in stillness and silence together. Our silence will be broken with music to continue our reflections. As we become aware of our surroundings, feeling our connection to the place we sit and its connection to the wider world. We are part of a wider human society. Our responses to the way the society works will be determined by our learning, our understanding, and our need to work as one. As we settle our bodies, focusing on our breath. My despair is transformed to hope, and I begin anew the legacy and light of caring.